afternoon, everybody. My name is Melanie Howell, and I'm the marketing manager here at Frontline Systems. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn session this afternoon. I'm excited to have David Adams from ACOM Solutions on the call. Just to give you a little bit of background on David, he has been with ACOM Solutions for 28 years, and he has experience in their sales management, channel sales management, and direct sales, and he joined the company in 1990. David, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. I appreciate the opportunity to present our solution, how you can improve your AP payment process. Again, my name is David Adams with ACOM. So let's go ahead and get started here. First thing, an agenda. There's a lot of excitement in the AP payment world related to electronic payments. We'll start by looking at what most companies that run Sage 300 do today to process payments. There's also some powerful drivers forcing change in the industry for companies to move to electronic payments. We'll look at those. I'll then talk about how we can help you get there and avoid some of the pitfalls other companies have experienced when moving to electronic payments. I'll then show you what the payment portal looks like, so show you the user experience of the solution, a little bit more about ACOM Solutions, and then, as I mentioned, we'll take all the questions at the end. So let's start by taking a look at what most companies running Sage 300 do today to process their vendor payments. So from Sage 300, typically you create a payment file, and then that is going to be sent to the printer. Their post-processing activities like bursting, folding, mailing. Some companies print check copies. Sometimes there's lost checks, you have to deal with those, and then there's vendor inquiries that come in, and that could often be a manual process, and you have to pull that payment from the file cabinet and respond back to the vendor. When we talk to companies, we're surprised how few of them are actually have moved their vendors to ACH, electronic payments. And if they're doing ACH, which can be done with Sage 300's functionality, but a lot of times we find companies are just doing it manual, where they might log into a bank website and do each payment one by one. And then for those ACH payments that you do, the vendors need to be sent remittance detail, which in most cases we find is also a manual process. You know, sometimes the remittance document's created and just manually sent via email or even in the mail. For additional manual payment types like wire transfers, credit cards, checks, manual checks, this too is usually a manual process. A credit card payment, for example, we find that sometimes companies will call each vendor and just give them the credit card number for payment. So later on in the presentation, I'll show you how we can automate this entire process. So given these manual processes, there are some powerful forces that are driving companies to move to electronic payments. Let's take a look at some of these. So most organizations understand there's a lot of benefit of paying vendors electronically over using paper checks. The Association for Financial Professionals surveyed 300 small to medium-sized businesses. They found that almost 80% of the companies that they surveyed say that they're looking to convert off of paper checks. Paper check printing is expensive, it's inefficient. That same survey put the cost to produce a check at $5.96. Now this is the total cost, including the paper, toner, postage, labor. So this is just one survey, and there have been a lot of ones that have been put out, and I've seen costs anywhere between $2 and $9. The inefficiencies of paper check processing add to that high cost. You've got things like the management of the supplies, like the check stock and the toner, the actual printing process itself, which takes time and resources, and then the actual post-processing activities. Again, these are all factors that contribute to the high cost of printing paper checks. When we talk to companies in the Sage 300 space, we see an ever-growing concern with payment fraud. In recent years, it's on the rise, and you can see from this chart, in 2017, 78% of companies reported being victims of some type of payment fraud. As you can see from this slide, checks are the #1 payment method most targeted for fraud. And as you start moving away from paper checks and going down this chart and going to electronic payment methods, things like ACH, which has a much lower rate of fraud. But later on in the presentation, I'll introduce another payment method that's called virtual cards that has an even lower rate of fraud than any of these other methods. So given the high cost of check printing, the high risk of check fraud, it's no wonder why many organizations are wanting to move to electronic payments. So the question is, why haven't more companies gone that way? There's two main reasons that we see. The first one is the amount of work that's required to get the vendors to switch to electronic payments. And then the other one is the ability to offer their vendors a wide variety of payment methods. So most CFOs and controllers understand there's that benefit, right, of moving to electronic payments, but the problem typically occurs in that effort to actually convert the vendors. This requires, a well thought out, detailed plan to move the vendors to electronic payments. You need the people internally to reach out and present the options. You need people to sign up the different vendors, and then there's an ongoing effort when you add new vendors, when you update current vendors when things change. Just as an example, and if you had 500 vendors, think about how much work it would be for your staff to communicate with all those vendors. I mean, at the minimum, you'd have 500 calls, right? That would just be one call to each vendor. But if you add things like emails, letters, you can see how much time this is actually going to take. And the other part that's really holding companies back is the actual lack of technology that's needed to be able to offer a wide variety of payment options to the vendors. The good news is I'll show you how our solution addresses these two issues, and it helps you make the transition to electronic payments easy. So the solution that we're offering, what it is it's a painless transition for you to get your vendors to move to electronic payments. As I've shown, companies want to go to electronic payments. The challenge is in just getting the vendors to switch. You need those internal resources to accomplish this. The solution is also going to eliminate the cost and hassle of printing checks. It'll make you 100% paper AP check free, and it requires no changes to your current Sage 300 printing process. So how does the solution work? There's two parts. There's a software side, and then there's what we call the vendor outreach side. Now on the software side, which is what this slide addresses, what we do is we take the existing check print file from Sage 300. There's no changes that you have to make. Instead of sending that payment file to a printer once it's generated from Sage 300, you upload it into our intelligent cloud-based payment hub. And what we do there is we store the payment rules at the vendor level. So our system knows by vendor what payment method each vendor's chosen. So some will get ACH, a small percentage will get that virtual credit card I'd mentioned before, and then there's some that will want to stay on checks. And for those checks, we'll actually print and mail the checks on your behalf. So that's how you get to 100% paper check free, even though there are some checks in the mix. Everything's cloud-based with secure web access, so there's nothing you have to support at your location. You've got complete control on when and how the vendors are going to be paid. There's advanced security and controls that allow for workflows or different approvals. So if you have dollar amount approvals or things that you need, and then everything's going to be automated, so you don't have to deal with that manual payment process I showed you before in the other slide. Just to kind of give you an analogy of this, what I like to say is that if you've ever used your personal bill pay at your bank website, this is kind of like that. Now you log into a secure website, you can see the pending payments, and then you can pick the payments you want to release. We've got a lot more functionality, but it's just from a basic standpoint, that's basically what it is. So the second half of this thing is the vendor outreach effort, and this is really the key to a successful outcome in converting the vendors to electronic payments. Again, as I've said multiple times in this presentation already, companies want to do this, it's just the effort. So we'll provide this outreach effort for you. We've got an in-house team that will reach out to 100% of your vendors on your behalf to get them signed up for electronic payments. And what we do is we sit down with you, of course, before we do anything. We create a written outreach plan that we jointly agree to. And the outreach plan includes things like, phone calls, emails, letters, everything that we're going to do to help get your vendors to switch. We'll present the different payment options, and we'll fit whatever option that specific vendor wants. And with us, we average about 8 touches per vendor. And remember that example before, if you had, say, 500 vendors, you can see that's a lot of work that's going to be going into this to actually get the vendors to switch, but we'll do all that for you. And we'll assign a project manager, and our vendor enrollment consultants will handle the outreach, as I mentioned. We also provide ongoing support that includes a help desk that the vendors can call to change their payment method, et cetera. And again, we do everything for you. By eliminating the cost to produce paper checks, you can save time and money. If we use that $5.96 cost that was from the AFP study, and let's say you're printing 200 checks per month, this comes out to be a little over $14,000 a year in cost, and then that cost would go away with our electronic payment solution. Remember, this is a savings you're going to receive every year, not just in year one. So even if you took out the soft cost to produce a check, again, the things like the labor and that type of thing, and let's say that you used $2 a check as your cost, you're still going to save $4,800 a year in this example. So we provide the software, the implementation, the vendor outreach. So the question is, of course, how much is this going to cost? The neat thing about the solution is it doesn't cost you anything. Now, of course, there is a cost, and I'll kind of explain how this gets funded. But what we do, let me explain how it works. The goal for us is to convert as many of the vendors as we can to some form of electronic payment. Most vendors are going to end up taking ACH, but there's a small percentage, usually we find about 15 to 20% of the vendors that want to take a virtual credit card. In the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that payment method that's even more secure than ACH. That's this virtual credit card. So let me explain how it works. Virtual credit card is a type of single-use credit card that's a lot more secure than a regular, plastic card with a number that gets used over and over again. This is actually, virtual cards are one of the fastest growing payment methods today. Almost all vendors that you have are going to have an existing merchant card account, right, to accept credit cards, whether it be Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So what happens is when a vendor says, yeah, I want to get paid with a virtual card transaction, what happens is our system will generate a one-time credit card number for that specific transaction. The funds are put on that card number, and then the vendor will log into their existing merchant account. In this case, it's MasterCard. That's who we partner with. And then they'll withdraw the funds from the card, and then that card number goes away. The next time the vendor gets paid, a new card number is generated for that payment. So again, it's never the same number over and over again, so it's very secure. ACOM's agreement that we have with MasterCard entails that we get a small percentage back for each of those virtual card transactions. So that rebate from MasterCard is how ACOM funds the solution and can provide it to you at no charge. And we realize that, as I mentioned before, that some vendors are never going to take any form of electronic payment. So for that 25 to 30% that still want a paper check, again, we'll print and mail those on your behalf. So that's how we take you to 100% paper check free. So you don't have to deal with any of those paper checks. And then keep in mind, you'll start getting the benefits of being paper check free on day one, even though what's really happening in reality is on day one, we're actually printing and mailing checks for all your vendors. Then over like a 3 to 6 month period, we'll convert the vendors. Again, we'll get about 75% to some form of electronic payment. So another question we get is, you see how this is funded by the small percentage of vendors that elect to take the credit card payment. So the question we get a lot is, why would a vendor want to take a credit card payment? Because they have to pay the fee. But there's a couple reasons that we find that some vendors actually prefer it. One of the primary ones is that some vendors want to get paid electronically, but they don't want to expose their bank account information to all their customers. Obviously, if you did that with ACH, you got to give all your customers your bank account number. And as we know, your bank account number is about the same as giving everybody a credit card number, because you can buy things with a bank account number. So some companies just don't like to do that. ACOM, the company I work for, our CFO will not take ACH. We actually do take credit cards, pay the interchange fee, that 1.5% to 2%, whatever it is. And for us, and like with a lot of companies, it's just a security issue, and also it's a convenience for our customers. We make it easy for them to pay us, and that's the other reason why some companies actually prefer the virtual card. How do we determine if you qualify for the free solution? As a typical rule of thumb, we find that a company that's still printing 200 or more paper AP checks a month almost always qualifies. But to confirm the qualification, what we do is do an analysis on your active vendors. So we ask that you send us some vendor data. Typically, it's just the vendor name, address, and the annual spend for each vendor. And then what we do is we match that data up against a database we have with MasterCard to see how many of your current vendors are already taking virtual credit cards from other customers. Because obviously, if they're taking them from other customers, there's a good chance they'll take them from you. And this gives us a good idea of what we're going to get. That, along with the spend and the total number of vendors, we can determine if you qualify. And then based on that, we'll come back to you and tell you, if you qualify. And of course, we'll do this analysis free of charge. And of course, there's no obligation to do this. Let's recap the benefits to you. The elimination of the paper checks and all the costs and hassles of paying the vendors by check. Better payment security. Remember, checks are the #1 payment method targeted for fraud. Also, all the manual steps of paying the vendors by check are going to go away. That's going to save you a lot of time and money. So what I wanted to do now is just step away from the slides for a second and just take a look at the the software itself. So this will be the payment portal that you as a user would use when you want to go in and release payments. So this is actually what the payment portal looks like, and there's a couple different approaches, and everything is customized to what you, the user, want. So some of these options up here at the top may be not exposed to all the different users, but for some companies, once you release your payment file, say in Sage 300, and it goes out of Sage 300, right now what it does, it goes and it prints. So as far as Sage 300 is concerned, the payment's complete, all the approvals are done, the payments are going to process, they're going to print. Instead of sending them to the printers I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they're uploaded into our secure payment hub here, and they would just show up here as pending payments. So in this example, I've got 29 pending payments that are total up to about $330,000. Again, for some companies, this maybe is all they want to do is just release them, right? Because they've already been approved before they released them in Sage. So I could just come in here, I can click the payment, say select all, and just hit the $sign and process them, and those are done, and then that's it. And you can see over here to the right, this is a mix of payments. I've got some checks, some ACH, some virtual credit cards, and that's the nice thing too, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you just send this one payment file, and we'll do that distribution based on what each vendor wants. You don't have to send us multiple payment files for different payment types. So if some companies it's that easy, and before this happens, when these payments get uploaded into our system, users that you designate can be automatically notified via email to tell them, hey, in this case, there's 15 payments, or there's 29 payments, whatever the payments are that I want to release are available for me to go into the portal to log in to release. They just click a hyperlink and they can go in. Now, for some companies, they want to add additional approvals in. So maybe even though the payment batch has been released from Sage 300, maybe I want to put some extra restraints on this. So the payments get put into our portal here, but maybe based on a certain dollar amount of the payment, or if it's from a certain vendor by a certain payment, I want to have some additional workflow approval steps. So with these, you can see I've got this bank. If I click on the bank, I can see all the payments that are for this particular bank. So here's all my payments that are pending and approval. So for example, if I want to look at this one, I can click it. It brings me the detail of the payment, so I can see the invoices it's paying. This one happens to be up here, so it says ACH. I could go ahead and individually approve this payment by hitting the approve button here. Or again, same thing, I could go in, I could block approve them. Maybe I want to see the transaction history. So this one, if I click here, I can see that this one had a workflow. So it started with this gentleman here, he approved it. Now it's at this person called Rick Miller, pending their approval. That's me today, I'm Rick Miller. So pending Rick Miller's approval, and then, then that may be it. Once I approve it here, maybe that's it. It goes into the process and it goes out and gets paid. Maybe at this step, I want to make a comment because I want to notify somebody before I make my approval. So I could click this and I could email select users or email this comment to anybody I wanted to, and then that comment will be added to the audit log here, the audit trail of this approval process that I could come back and look at later on to see what happened with this payment. Again, this can be very sophisticated in the sense that you can create these custom workflows to meet whatever approval process that you want to set up, or it can be very basic, very simple if you just want to release the payments, but all that's available to you. So that's pending and that's approvals. You can also, of course, go back in and look at all the process payments for a given year, and then from a given year, you can filter down on the different batches. So as an example, here's 2 payments that are in here, and I can look, these are both checks, and if I want more detail, I can come in here and I could say, let me view that particular payment again. Remember, I could see the payment. Here's the invoice. This one paid. This one happens to be a paper check. Maybe somebody needs to see the remittance detail because they lost it. I could, from right here, I could click this and I could email the remittance detail to a user or a group of users via email right from my screen. The neat thing is if you're looking for payments or trying to reconcile and see what's going on, all this is done electronically. You don't have to go into file cabinets and go looking for stuff to find those payments. Another neat thing is being able to search for things. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I never got this payment, or I'm missing this, or I need to see that, you can go into our search screen and you can search by payment, and then within the payment here, you can all different types of metadata fields available. It could be I'm going to search by the payment method, the number, the date, the address. How about let's do the pay to name. Then if I know a specific company name I want to search, or maybe I want to say contains a certain value, in this case, let's say the word telephone. And if I add the filter here, this will show me all the payments that contain the word telephone in them. So again, these are here, same thing. I can now click on the payment. Maybe that's the one I'm after. I can see the payment number, I can see the bank, all the detail, the date, and then I can get to even more detail where I can see here's the properties, what happened. So here's when the payment was processed, here's when it was exported, this one, remember, is ACH, and I can see that. And then I can even get into the history detail of, okay, so what is the history of this particular individual payment? Here's all the approvals, here's when it was approved, all the dates and times, and I can even see who actually even did anything with this payment, who viewed it, when they viewed it, dates and times, all that. So you get very detailed information, very detailed access to all the payment and payment history, again, right from your screen. So, and there's a number of different reports you can run. There's standard reports we can do. Reports could be exported with this little Excel button. I could export this particular transaction or this query that I just did right from my screen. So there's a lot of functionality here, a lot of flexibility. I just wanted to give a high-level overview, and if anybody is interested in the solution, the next step would be to get with Frontline Systems. We can do a one-on-one demo and do this more specific to what you want to see and what your specific requirements are. But hopefully this gives you a good first look at the solution. I'll start to close this up with a little bit about ACOM Solutions. ACOM's been in business for 34 years. We've been a Sage Gold Development Partner for 10 plus years. We've got in-house expertise on Sage 300. We've got over 200 employees. Our corporate office is in Long Beach, California. Also, we have offices in Atlanta and Phoenix, and over 4,000 total clients worldwide, but over 1,500 that use our payment solutions. We've been doing licensed payment software for 20 plus years. About 2.5, 3 years ago, we came out with this cloud-based version of our payment software, and really this has transformed ACOM's business. We very rarely sell licensed software anymore. We've spent the last 1.5 years moving our licensed software clients to this cloud-based solution, and now we've opened it up to our partners like Frontline about 1 year ago to make this available to other users.